Hi everybody, Dan here. I want to share with you some slides from a different publisher. Some of the slides I agree with, some I do not, and I want to explain why. I agree with this one for sure. We have to keep our presentation simple. Studies have demonstrated that a human being just cannot retain much at one time of a visual presentation. And your audience won't have any written material in their hands, or shouldn't. Remember what I said about handouts. You don't want to hand them out until you're done. Otherwise, you lose your audience. So we have to keep it simple. One of the ways to keep it simple is to follow the Toastmasters formula. I've shared this before, but it bears repeating. The formula goes like this. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Introduction, body, conclusion, every time. The book suggests that we open with a startling statement. I disagree with that. I've seen people do it. It doesn't always work because you can lose your audience. You can send them on a mental detour where they're not listening to you. I'll give you an example. Once I worked for a company where the CEO called in the entire sales department after a lousy quarter of sales. He walked to the microphone scowling, and he looked at us and said, "I want each of you to look to your right and look to your left." And then he said, "In 6 months, that person won't be here." Of course, this is ridiculous on its face. If everybody looked to the right and left and those people wouldn't be there, there would be no one left. But he was trying to make a point and trying to put the fear of God in us. The thing is, his startling statement completely failed. We were all thinking we just got our notice and instantly got into job search mode. So we never heard a word of his presentation. Another thing the book or the publisher recommends is opening with a question. I don't think that's a good idea, unless it's a simple question. I mean, if you ask how many here have ever been in gridlock traffic, that's fine. But let's say you're about to present a new corporate policy that everyone from now on will have to wear uniforms. You don't want to begin your presentation by asking, how many of you like the idea of uniforms? Because you will be opening a can of worms, and you will lose control of your time as civil war erupts among your audience. When it comes to visuals, it's good not to get into details because, again, nobody can follow details. Keep it simple. But we do have to elaborate on the visuals. We can't let them speak for themselves, especially cartoons. I have seen so many people have cartoons on a slide and don't walk the audience through the cartoon so nobody gets it because they can't read the font. The font in a cartoon is generally very small. And that brings me to the font. Remember, when you're designing your presentation, the computer screen is like 15 inches from your eyes. So everything looks great. But when you're in a room presenting and the room is 100 feet long with people way in the back, they cannot read the slides that were so clear to you as you designed it. So remember, big font, especially for the most important parts of your slide. Down here, the bullet point phrases is a good idea. You never want to use sentences. Why not? Because you'll read them, or even long phrases. You will read them. And that is the kiss of death for a PowerPoint. These are pretty good organizational patterns: past, present, future, problem, causes, solution. These all work. Pro and con works, but I want to mention the pro and con. I've seen this fail because it exposes the bias of the speaker. If you do pro and con, you have to be equally pro and equally con. If you've got 5 bullets of pro, put in 5 bullets of con, express them all with the same enthusiasm so your audience doesn't know what side you're on until you want them to, but not when you're presenting the pro and con. These are suggestions from the publisher when it comes to notes. Either put them on cards or on paper and use long phrases or complete sentences. I'm against both of these ideas. First of all, if you put your notes on cards, you tend to stack the cards and knock them against the podium, or in your nervousness, you may shuffle them, and then you're out of place. Also, the idea of using long phrases or complete sentences is just as bad for your notes as it is for your PowerPoint, because you're going to read them. Handling questions. I love this idea of anticipating questions. If you give some thought to it, it's pretty easy to anticipate at least some of the questions that will arise from your audience. And you can prepare answers for them. Not that you want to memorize them, but do get the words on your tongue. Also, tell the audience early how you'll handle questions. You don't want people raising their hands in the middle of your presentation, especially if you're limited on time and you've been tasked to reveal a certain amount of information within, say, 15 minutes. You don't want people interrupting you. So just tell the audience, look, you may have questions. Chances are I'm going to cover them during this presentation, but if not, we'll have a nice Q&A afterwards. Also, regarding questions, if somebody asks a question, don't say that's a good question to them. Somebody else asks a question and then you answer it. You see the difference? You got to say that's a good question every time or you diss your audience. Why would you want to repeat the question before you answer it? Well, for a couple of reasons. You want to repeat the question so everybody in the audience can hear it, but that isn't the real reason. You want to repeat the question before you answer it because it gives you time to think. Only a small part of your brain is repeating the question. The other 99% is wondering, how the hell am I going to answer this? Also, if somebody has a hostile question, let's take that uniform example, and somebody raises their hand and says, I think this is all BS. You got to be careful. You have to rephrase the question. Say something like, so you're suggesting our uniform policy will inhibit self-expression? Is that it? Get them to agree, but you rephrase it in a way that's acceptable and even flattering to them. When it comes to public speaking and the idea of looking at public speaking as a performance, I think this is very dangerous. A performer is under the spotlight. A performer is a high wire act at a circus. If they make a mistake, it's going to be very obvious. If you, on the other hand, make a mistake as a speaker, it's not going to be obvious. They don't know your script. But secondly, you don't want to put yourself under a spotlight. You can make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I know you notice them. It's fine. As long as, you're comfortable at the podium. You are a human being communicating to other human beings. You're communicating. And if you make an occasional mistake, so do all the great speakers in the world. Remember, use the energy that fear provides. In other words, nervousness. Use that nervousness, but you want to get it in formation. Breathe from the tummy. Try to move. Again, when you're doing a webcam, I don't expect you to move. But at the podium, at work, when you're giving a presentation, move your body. Maybe get away from the podium. Go into the audience a little bit. Use gestures, smile, eye contact. And finally, I suggest you visit a Toastmasters club. This is really the only way to get better at public speaking. Frankly, this course online will go a little way. It'll help you a little bit, but it won't prepare you for the real thing. Toastmasters is the only way. Why do we join Toastmasters? Because we're uncomfortable speaking. We're afraid of public speaking. That's why I joined over, well, I'll say 30 years, although it was longer than that, but I don't want to do the math. Every club is different. Every club has a different personality, so visit a few. Most large companies have a Toastmasters club. There are advantages to it. For one thing, you have a peer-to-peer relationship with your managers. When you're in a Toastmasters club, everybody is equal. And your managers have an opportunity to see you in a way they may never see you in your little cubicle. They may never even talk to you because they're walking by. But when you're in a club, they get to know you and you get to know them. And this is a place to showcase your talents. The downside to a company-run Toastmasters club is it's difficult to evaluate your boss when he or she gets up there to give a presentation and it's your turn to evaluate it. Chances are you're going to say that was the greatest presentation I've ever heard in my life, when in reality it needed some work. Now, most people in a Toastmasters club encourage and solicit constructive criticism, so that's not a huge hump. So think about it. If you have a Toastmasters club in your organization, go visit it. In fact, if you think you're in need of extra credit during this course, you can get some by visiting a Toastmasters club and telling us all about it. Okay, I'll see you in the next screencast. Bye.